So I just couldn't let this sit on me. In the last video, I tested this Sparkle GTX 260 with the Accelero GTX Pro heatsink on it. And I was talking about how I have this Palette GTX 780 Jetstream fan assembly that just so happens to fit the Accelero heatsink really great. And I just couldn't wait. I wanted to know how good it is. The stock fan assembly got to a 45-degree maximum on the core temperature. And so let's set these fans to 100%. And they are already like quite a lot louder. And let's set this to the same clocks that I ran before, which is this. And let's benchmark this. Already at 40. I'm gonna let this run through. And we're gonna see if these fans, which should move more air, actually help. And here we are, 42 degrees. That's 3 degrees better. I did see 43 for a very short amount of time, but it's been at 42 now for quite a while. That's pretty good. That's a 3-degree increase just from swapping out the fans. So let's keep going. I did also mention how you can adapt the mounting system for this heatsink to run the card without the IHS. I still haven't done that. I've just swapped the fans. So let's see if that can be better, because I did see, as I said, down to 39 degrees while testing. Now that might have just been because my ambient was colder. I have a 25-degree ambient temperature right now, which is quite a lot higher than I had over the last couple days. But I have a feeling we might get another degree or two out of this. So let's investigate. So here we have the card, and I'm gonna set this up to run DirectDi now. So yeah, this is really just a different fan assembly that I've just tacked onto this heatsink. Just kind of fits onto this like that. But let's remove the heatsink from the card, and right now it's using the default method, which is pretty standard. You have a hole in the heatsink and you put some screws in it through the back of the card. But once we're done with our change to the mounting system, it's gonna look a bit different, and as I already alluded to in the last video, we're going to have a few mounting pressure problems. So doesn't want to entirely come off. Yeah, it left the IHS on there. I did already delete the card, but here you can see the IHS. That's on the card with the default mounting solution. Let's try to get this up without getting any thermal paste on my fingers. Yeah, so that's the IHS of the card. Let's put that away. And here we have the default mounting solution, and you can already see the problem. It's these standoffs, because if you try to put the card on like this without the IHS, it's not going to make contact, because these standoffs are sized precisely so that they make contact when the card has an IHS on it. So yeah, it's not going to work. However, one thing that you can do is remove the mounting plates and actually just swap them around. Use them from the other side. And it just so happens that this metal bend right here, you can see how it's a bit shorter than the standoffs. This bent piece of metal right here just happens to be the exact thickness of a delidded core. So if we put the plates on like this, the cold plate now makes contact. But our screws here will no longer reach the hole, so we need some slightly longer screws, which thankfully I have, because I have bins like this. So we can use these screws, for example, which are also M2, but a lot longer. So we can use these. I'm actually gonna just screw them into the base plate and then have them stick through the card and put a nut on the backside of the card, because these are very long and they are not a Phillips head, so these are very annoying to screw in every time. So I want to minimize doing that. So what I'm gonna do is put them in like this and just get them on a bit like this. So you get the idea. I'm gonna do this to the rest of them. Put them on like this. And if we then put the bracket on, we're gonna have 4 screws sticking out of the heatsink like that, and then the card will just fit onto that. And then we use nuts like this to tighten it down. So I'm gonna do that now. Okay, so the plates are now on with the screws to it. And just using the thermal paste that's still on the card in the heatsink, we can now test if we have contact. So if I line this up correctly, and put this on, and then press down a little bit, and then pull it back up. You can see that we are having contact, and this is actually a pretty good looking contact pattern. This is a lot better than what I usually get. So yeah, that's kind of the problem. Contact as good as this is very rare. Usually like the side that faces this side has very poor contact. You cannot usually see the copper on that side. So sometimes the mount is good, sometimes it's pretty bad. I'm gonna put some more thermal paste on here and then make a good flat coat so that it's even. And also flatten it on the die directly a bit. And then we're gonna have enough thermal paste to fill the gaps. So let's plug the fan cable in and put this thing on. It's kind of annoying because the I/O shield always gets caught on this part of the heatsink. That was not very thought through. Okay. It is down. Let's press it down a bit. I would love to have like one of those retention brackets like this, but I don't have one for the outer holes for the G200 spacing. I have one for the inner holes, but that's not what this heatsink uses, so yeah. And I'm gonna use these M2 nuts because they're pretty big and easily usable. I'm gonna put some washers on. Metal ones though, I don't have any plastic washers. Well, that should be enough. I just don't want to damage any of the like traces around the hole. And the metal washer should already be enough for that. So let's put these on. And this is also kind of a bit of a problem. There's nothing really that spreads the pressure between these 4 screws. If I tighten one of the nuts more than the others, it's just gonna have more pressure on that side. If I had something like this bracket, or just any kind of backplate that fits this spacing, it would equalize at least a little bit, but like this I just have to, well, tighten the nuts as evenly as I can, and then hope that the pressure is good. Okay, that looks good. This fan assembly can actually go a bit more inwards. I left a pretty big gap. It can go like this. There's a bit of a rounding in this part, so it always has to hang over a little bit. But this should be good. So, now we have direct die. As you can see, the tolerance is very tight. This is like directly on top of the PCB, but we now have the heatsink with the good fan assembly mounted on the card without having to use this IHS that was on the card. And so removing this removes another layer of thermal paste and also removes a few millimeters of metal that the heat had to go through between the GPU and the heatsink now. So this should just have improved our cooling quite a lot. The problem being that the mounting pressure is very inconsistent, and that might be a problem. Once I'm done testing this, I'm going to tear it apart again, and if I see something very problematic, I'm going to show you. Another thing is, you can now see these capacitors right here are actually contacting the heatsink, and I had to very slightly bend the fin stack up a bit from the heatsink, so you might be able to see how this is like slightly angled away from the card, because otherwise it would do this, like bend the card, causing even more poor pressure on the core right here. So yeah, it's quite janky, but if it can get us to 39 degrees, like I remember, then I'm willing to do that. It's not going to be pretty, but it will potentially give us better overclocks. So let's get this back onto the test bench. So, card's booting up. There's the post beep. And we have a picture. That's good. At least we didn't kill the card. And let's see what the improvement is like. I would love to see 39 degrees again. But that might have just been due to lower ambient temperature before. But if we can get from 42 to 40, it is a very slight difference only, but it might just be worth it, because once you start cranking the voltage and the card runs hotter, that difference might become more than just 2 degrees. So let's start this, take a look at the temperatures, max the fan speed, and set the clocks accordingly. Memory is fine. Let's restart the benchmark. And let's see, we're already at 39. I have a feeling we're not going to stay here. I think this will go higher. But let's let the benchmark run through and see where we end up. Well, that's nice. We've only gone up 1 degree to 40, so we've shaved 2 degrees off of our temperature by running the card without the IHS, which isn't that big of an increase, but together with the better fans, we've gone from 45 to 40. And that again is a significant increase. 5 degrees that's enough for maybe one step of core clock that you can now run that would crash before because of temperature. So it is worth doing that if you also wanna like get some really high RPM fans. You could also just get like some 80 or 92 millimeter case fans, strap it to that, set those to maximum RPM. That might actually be better than this. I don't have any to test, so I'm going to stay on the pallet fans. But yeah, so this is probably how I'm going to run the air stage. Deleted core, Accelero heatsink, pallet fans. It is janky. The mount, we're gonna take a look at the mount after this. It is inconsistent. So you have a pretty high chance of having a run that just sucks. Like you overclock it, you max it, and then you take it apart and then you see the mount was shit. So you remount and test again until you get one that's good. And that might take a while. So this is a bit annoying. I have a pretty good system for getting good reliable mounts on water cooling and the other air-cooled cards, because for those I have these retention plates, which focus the pressure inwards onto the core and equalizes it between the 4 different holding points. I don't have that here. So we're gonna have to work around that, which, you know, makes everything a bit more interesting, because now your skill in a good year at tightening nuts is going to potentially affect your performance in this competition. Yeah. Oh, I just saw 41 degrees. Oh no. Yeah, anyway. So there is quite a variance, as you can see, between all the different air coolers. Now, the worst one we've had was this Asus thing right here, which had 60 or 61 degrees in the test. Now, that's a 20 degree difference, and that will surely impact overclocking performance. But I think if you just use some very high RPM fans or just have better ambient temperatures than me, like I'm at 25 degrees ambient right now, you can go to 15 degrees in the rooms. So you can shave 10 degrees off by just having a low ambient temperature, just opening the window. That brings you to 45 on a card like this. This one was 55 in my test. So with a good ambient temperature, that makes 45. And then one of the blower cards, those were at 57, which means 47 at low ambient. And now we're just 7 degrees difference between this. Of course, I could also do lower ambient with this. But yeah, like you can get to this with a blower heatsink by just doing lower ambient temp. And 7 degrees is still a difference, but I think it's not a massive difference. You can just pump more voltage into it, or just have better memory clocks, or just have a more efficient Windows. So at the end of the day, I don't think me having this heatsink is going to be a massive cheat code or anything. It will help. But you know, like the air stage is the stage that most people will do. And because 260s are rather easily to cool, they have big dies, don't put out a lot of heat. I'm satisfied to see that cooling them is not going to be an issue. Unless you have one of these. This thing is bad. But yeah, so you can improve the temperatures of, if you have an Accelero, I know at least one other person has one of these, so you can improve the performance of it by doing some janky mods to it. But you don't have to. You probably don't have to. This still has the problem that there's no cooling on the memory chips, and as I said, memory overclocking is pretty important on these. So if you have a heatsink that can keep the memory colder, like you might have a 10 degrees hotter core temperatures, but if your memory has better cooling, you might actually get a higher score, because memory clock is worth more than core clock on these, in my experience. So, yeah. I'm gonna see. I hope the Accelero just works best. And if I have memory temperature problems, I might just cheese it by putting like fans on it like this, and then hope that the extra airflow into the memory chips fixes it. We're going to see, but I think this is how I'm going to run the air stage. So yeah, we're gonna take a look at that mount now. So let's shut this down and take the card apart again. So here we have the card, and let's take a look at how good our mount was. So I have no idea what to expect, because the card doesn't have a hotspot sensor, and with a die this big, well, I also don't know how many temperature sensors this thing has total. It might not even have more than one sensor. So I have no idea how the mount quality is. Let's carefully take this off. That looks good, actually. That looks pretty good. Now, we had better contact on the upper side. Now you see the lower side had worse contact. But I'm not seeing the pattern of this side having worse contact than this side that I saw a lot. Instead, we have the lower side having worse contact. But you can see copper shining through pretty much everywhere. Usually I was seeing a part where like you could see an imprint of the die, but you couldn't see any of the copper. So this mount is actually pretty decent. Maybe I just need to do it a couple times and then I get good enough at it, but this mount doesn't even look too bad. So yeah, I guess this is how I'm gonna be running it. The only really thing that could screw me over is just memory temperature, because that's the cooling on the card. Now, there is this thing for the DPIO chip, which I guess it helps. I just thermo tape a little heatsink onto the other cards when I run them on water cooling, and then the memory chips and the VRM are just naked. So yeah, so these memory chips getting too hot, that might be a problem. Yeah, I hope it isn't, but that might be a problem. If it is, I might have to just throw a blower heatsink onto this. I might actually do that, because that is the only heatsink that has memory cooling integrated into it that I can run for the air stage on this PCB, and like every PCB that isn't the red palette card. So yeah. But this mounting pattern is mostly good. It's one of the better ones I saw of it. It's not perfect, like compared to the other mounts I get on other heatsinks, or like anything using this is much better. Like this is getting like pretty consistently almost perfect mounts. The only thing I could make it better is if I like lap the heatsink and the GPU core. But this, I'm satisfied with this. This seems good enough. So yeah, I guess it's just down to how it's tightened. I was fearing that there is just something wrong with maybe the brackets are slightly bent or something like that, because I was getting a lot of mounts where this side of the mount was just shit. So yeah, that would be it for the video. So we've managed to improve the performance of this heatsink quite a lot. Whether it is going to change anything remains to be seen. Better core temperatures are always good, but it does come at the cost of probably slightly higher memory temperatures. And the question is whether that trade-off is worth it, which, you know, will depend on how much each of those things scales with voltage. Temperature, I mean. Voltage also. But mostly temperature in this case. So, yeah. that would be it. So I don't know if I'm gonna do a live stream for the air stage. If I do, I will be running this. I will probably do some pre-testing on like which card is best for each stage, and then run that on stream. Because the streams are just gonna be like 8 hours long if I run all of my cards. But yeah. And I will also set up Sub-Zero soon. Yeah. There will probably be a stream for that. Maybe even for the first time I run it, just to see what I go through when I Sub-Zero something for the first time, because it's always a bit interesting. But for now the video is over. If there's any more live streams, I'll hopefully let you know. Maybe I'll just spontaneously decide to start one, but if I plan anything, I'll let you know on the community page. And until then, this has been it. Goodbye.